What's up, guys? I just want to do a quick video to update. I sold parts of two of my positions. I'm still cleaning up my portfolio. And so I'll talk about Weibo and Australian family lawyers, or legal, sorry, in this video. But I want to start with a quote that I like, and the quote goes like this. There are two types of people in the world. There are people who are humble, and then there are people who are about to be. And I'm personally oscillating between those two categories of people all the time, and these two stocks have put me firmly back in the humble camp, as I've got my I have got my ass kicked on both of them, and I've sold at a loss. Now, I hadn't sold a stock at a loss in a long time, and I was like, oh, that's great. I haven't had to take a loss, but now I've taken two. So Weibo, I sold, I forget what the price was. It was around 19, just shortly after the earnings. And I bought that around 29. So I'm down by just around a third on that one, and I took the loss. And Australian Family Legal, AFL, I've also taken I sold half the position and took about a 33% loss on that one. So now the reasons why I sold, I'll just go over these quickly. So Weibo, I actually think, is still a good business. It's a cash cow. It's got good margins. The earnings weren't great for the last quarter, but that's kind of expected with the economic environment in China. Actually, in the post-Olympic sort of slump, they make a lot of revenue. They made a lot of revenue from the Olympic build-up, as a lot of people are advertising on their platform and using it to communicate during a big event like that. But so this is expected. The revenue would come down, the growth rates come down, but I do still think it's a cash cow going forward. They have like I said, the Twitter kind of moat, because they're basically Twitter. I think it's the second biggest social media platform in China, and they have a big buyback and big margins and all this kind of stuff. The reason I sold was at the beginning of September, I was looking to increase my cash position because I'm still a little nervous about the Federal Reserve. I did a video back in March on saying basically they're going to keep tightening until inflation goes away or until they break something. And I think we're still in that cycle, but it's not as obvious now what's happening. It was really obvious back then that you didn't want to hold high-risk assets going into a Fed tightening cycle. But I do think that they're still intent on getting rid of inflation, and they basically say, we don't care what we break in the process, we've got to get rid of inflation. That's basically what they said at the last meeting. So I just like having some cash to be able to deploy if the world goes to hell. It might not. I'm not saying it's going to hell. I feel a bit naked without any cash. So I was looking at my portfolio and I said, okay, well, Weibo, I don't know it inside out like I do some of the other ones, and I have to admit that the China fear might be getting to me a little bit, and it's not really the headline fear. I'm actually afraid of Joe Biden. He looks recently like he needs a bad guy. So, and I knew Trump was like that. He really went after China, and he was going to use them as his bad guy. But it looks like Biden's sort of doing that as well. He has very low approval ratings, and I'm a little worried he might do something stupid and start a fight. It looks like he's trying to provoke China, so I'm a little bit afraid of Joe Biden right now. Maybe I'll change my mind after the midterms here, but I think the risk is actually on the U.S. side. Maybe that's crazy. I do think, like, if I was in China, I would just own this stock all day long. But I just wanted to reduce my China exposure a little bit, and I had 3% in Weibo after it came down. So I sold that off to simplify the portfolio. Now, in terms of Australian Family Legal, this one's a different story. I had a bigger position on this one. I had like over 10%, and then it got crushed after the earnings. And one of the there's a few things in these earnings that I didn't like. One was I should just talk about what my thesis is really quickly. There's more to it, but I'll just very quickly. It's basically a growth play. These guys were shooting at 50 million in revenue and 10 million in EBIT by the end of fiscal 2025, which is June in Australia. So June 25. They're around 20 million now. So that's like a 2.5x in terms of revenue, and the EBIT way up. And so if you applied like a 10 multiple to the EBIT, then that's 100 million in market cap. The stock was trading about 29 million when I bought it. So that's sort of the idea there. And they also had this ability to buy. The industry they're in is very fragmented, and there was all these small players, and they're all private. And AFL is the only one that's publicly listed, so they can basically issue shares at 10 times EBITDA, or whatever it trades at, 8 times, 10 times. And then they're buying these smaller players at kind of average about 2 times EBITDA, right? So they have this, like, if you just keep doing that, the dilution makes a lot of sense, right? You're just massively adding to your cash flow very cheaply. And so that was the main idea with buying it. They would keep doing that. But in this earnings report, I've had a couple of big problems. So one is the revenue is actually down in the second half from the first half. They were growing like crazy before this, and it's actually down by 1.5 million from the first half on a pro forma basis, and so that's very concerning, because if my thesis is a growth thesis and there's no growth, then I don't really have a leg to stand on, especially because I can't actually forecast the growth rate, because there's not a lot of information on this company. So this is one of the downsides of having a small company that where there's not a lot of information available. I'm pretty dependent on them to tell me what's going on. And last earnings, they were very upbeat about where everything was going. So what's happened this period is they basically said, the hiring and staff situation has been really difficult. Apparently they've lost some lawyers, and, that really hurts their revenue generating ability. Like, I do know that this is true because my company is partially in Australia, and the unemployment rate there is very low, and it's very much an employee market. It's like, I think it's the lowest unemployment rate ever, at like 3 point something %. And basically employees can ask for whatever they want now, and it's really hurting businesses. So I do believe that has been a problem for them. But the issue that I have, that's not actually my main issue. My main issue is that the report didn't really talk much about what was wrong. If you read it, you kind of thought, oh, everything's going great. But if you compare it to what they were selling in the last earnings report, it's a fair bit down from where they were shooting. And I don't think that this gives me a lot of trust in what they're saying about the future. They, like when a company has a bad period, I want them to say, this is a disaster. We know it's a disaster. Here's what we're doing about it. Here are the problems. Here are our solutions. I want some straightforward. I want the management to be straightforward with me, and I don't think that's happening here. I think they're just saying, everything's great, nothing to see here. It's going to be great going forward. No problem. Everything's great, and don't worry about that problem. That's not a big deal. And I don't believe that it's fine. So I've lost trust in what management is telling me. And like I said, there's not a lot of other sources of information. I do know one guy who's given me very good information, who's very straight with me about what's going on in the company, and I really appreciate that. But I do need to be able to believe management. And the kicker on top of that, the I think is the executive chair, Grant Dearlove, sold 1.4 million of his shares. And this guy was the biggest shareholder. He had 3.9 million shares, and he sold 40% of them right after earnings. And the reasoning was, it said, oh, there was a big, a big capital gains tax bill, and the board approved this sale. But I just don't like when I see the main guy selling 40% of his shares. I don't know if I necessarily buy the capital gains reasoning, but that's very concerning for me. So I don't want to be on the other side of the table from somebody who's selling into this weakness and holding the bag. So I still have half the shares that I had before. I sold half of them, mostly because I sold and then it came down even further, and I think it's kind of too cheap now to sell. It's actually like maybe a good risk reward to hold some now. So if it stays if the stock stays around 23, 24%, I probably just hold those shares. But I mean, if it went up to 30 cents or something, I'd probably get rid of the rest just to free up some cash. So disappointing from AFL perspective, but you've got to take the loss when it becomes clear that it's a loss. And when I was studying trading a few years ago, I heard a good quote. It's a pretty basic quote, but I remember listening to this very successful trader, and he basically said, take the damn loss, right? And because, again, very, very simplistic, but if you hold something that you know is a problem, you've got to get rid of it instead of holding and hoping that it goes back up, right? I've done that before. I ended up holding things for years that I just, it'll get back to where I bought it, or it'll get back to here, and then I'll be able to recoup some of my losses. But it's actually a better idea just to admit when you're wrong and get out. And so that's what I've done with as much as I could get out. And now it's just too cheap. I'll just keep the rest. Unless it goes back up, and then I'll get out again. But so I kind of contradicted myself there, obviously. But if you do the financial valuation on it, it's actually very cheap right now. So I'll just sell half and see what happens over the next few months with the other half. But just wanted to update you guys on that one and admit that I was wrong and that I'm back in the humble camp, and hopefully I stay there for a while. All right. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you in the next video.